Kia ora and welcome to the Niggly Niche Cast. This is your boy, Mr. Diggity Doo Doc, joined as always by the wobbly wildcard from the naughty Northland of Aotearoa. And on this episode of the Niche Cast, we are going to focus on Aotearoa New Zealand basketball matters. And in the second half of the show, we're going to focus on Aotearoa New Zealand football matters. So we've got NBL happening, we've got New Zealand Breakers starting the NBL season, we've got Steven Adams over in the NBA doing some stuff. In the football, Wellington Phoenix have started their A-League season, we've got women from Aotearoa playing in the Australian W League, and of course we've got the Flying Kiwis, and all of that stuff is being written about, plus more on the Niche Cage, so check that out. We're serving up a email on the Friday and a Monday, so check those out. We've got an email coming up tomorrow at the time of recording, so check that out. And of course, support the Niche Cage by Patreon. That's the best way to support the Niche Cage and keep the mission of highlighting, documenting, celebrating Aotearoa as the best sporting nation in the world. El Wildcardo, how's the weather?
How's the weather? Unseasonably cold this morning, actually. Is one of them bloody, what do you call them? The southerlies creeping its way up the country, apparently. I think it's wrecking everybody from what I've heard. It was actually the first day this week that I haven't gone for a run as well, because I'm semi in training, so it was probably a nice day to skip. It was a bit chilly.
Beautiful. Ever the professional athlete, just skipping when it gets a bit chilly. Like, we can all, that's not to say anything bad, we can all relate to it.
Yeah.
We can all relate to that. That's how we roll. That's just how it is. Righto, Wildcard. We'll start our basketball with Steven Adams in the NBA. We have talked a wee bit about Sean Marks and just the wildness that he has found himself in. Just, you know, the humble Kiwi trooper, Sean Marks, just out there in an absolute scenario that he has found himself in. So we covered a bit of that in the Niche Cage Variety Show. We've talked a bit about that, so we'll focus on Steven Adams here, Wildcard. And I want to kind of just talk a bit more about how he's playing his basketball more than anything else. Like, we can kind of refer to some statistics, but it's early season, and the Pelicans are a bit all over the show. They won 4 of their first 6 games, and then they've lost 6 out of 7 games maybe since then. So it's a bit of it's the equivalent to the Sean Marks scenario that he's found himself in. That's what the Pelicans are going through at the moment, just all over the show. But I want to know, and I want to talk about how Steven Adams is playing. My perception is that he is just playing basketball for the Pelicans in extremely New Zealand fashion. Like, Steven Adams is the dude among better, more high-profile names. Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram's a bit of a shooter as well. Steven Adams is the dude doing all the dirty work. He's getting the rebounds. He's doing stuff that even can't be measured. He's out there. He's the dude handling the ball at the top of the key to set up a play for one of the other players. And quite often, like, he'll have the ball near the 3-point line, and people are running around him, and the play kind of breaks down, like option A breaks down, and then you just see Steven Adams with the ball, and he's like looking around, and you can see that he's processing all the next steps, and it's just happening really slowly. So that's kind of fun to watch a few times, him get caught in those. He always makes a good pass. That's the beautiful thing. So he's never really stuck with the ball. He's just doing all the dirty work. Is there anything other than that is interesting to you? Like, are you seeing anything else on top of that with what Steven Adams is doing for the Pelicans?
I'm finding the whole thing interesting, just not necessarily from Steven Adams' point of view, though. Like, I look at what he's doing, and I think he's probably one of those dudes who, like, I mean, he must, yeah, the NBA's got a statistic for everything, right? I bet Steven Adams leads the league in politely talking to referees after being called for a foul, for one thing. And he does the same thing with, like, when he gets subbed out, you see he'll talk to like his assistant coaches or whatever. He did this more at OKC just because their relationships were there. This is early days at the Pelicans, it's a bit different, but like he's one of those guys who's constantly thinking and analyzing and trying to improve what he's doing just to make slightly better decisions and to be in slightly better positions and all these kind of things. And so when you chuck a guy with that kind of work, like that, not level of work ethic, because everyone's got a big work ethic to make it to the NBA, but that particular like analytical type of work ethic, that style of how he plays his basketball, I think that's pretty well suited to being like the island in the storm, while this team is still figuring things out because I mean, every team is having struggles at the moment. It's just a wild season because there wasn't much of a preseason. And then you have the fact of not having much of a preseason. Some teams are just worse off than others. And a team like the Pelicans with a new head coach, basically a whole new style, because last year they were quite shocking defensively. And Van Gundy's been brought in specifically to make them a good defensive team. And then like you have that amidst a couple new starters, just different combinations. Key players are young, sort of early in their NBA careers, and there's just like they're coming at it from more of a handing than most teams. So I think Adams is just kind of like that dude who kind of the coach is using as the glue guy to just try and hold everything together in the meantime while everyone gets up and on the same page. And for that reason, am still like holding off on, like, I'm not too worried about the fact they keep losing bloody games. Like I just watched them yesterday get blown out by Utah, and Adams didn't play at all in the fourth quarter there, which was a bit of an odd one because it'd been steadily increasing his minutes as they'd been struggling more, and they'd tried to find a bit more stability in games, and that meant playing like more traditional lineups where at least guys know what they're meant to be doing and who they're meant to be guarding and all this kind of stuff. So that was a little odd, but it was more like they just needed their shooters out there because they were losing, and that was the only way they were going to get back in the game, which they didn't, so it didn't really matter. He's just, I mean, Van Gundy loves him already. It's clear, like the way he's spoken about him has been like the kind of, at one point he was talking about how the team is good when Adams is on the court and bad when Adams is off the court. It's not obviously as simple as that. He's just sort of given a little soundbite for the media, but I don't know that there's too much different that Adams is doing from what he was like at the Thunder. I don't know, but I just sort of think he's there to like hold things together. I don't know. What else have you seen from him? Like, is there anything that stood out in terms of just not adaptations, but just like the way he's used here versus at the Thunder? Because I'm just sort of looking at him like he's the consistent figure in this team, and everything else is moving around him. And that's hard to make judgments because you don't actually really have a comparison when you look at it from that perspective. But I don't know, you might have seen plenty other things that I've missed.
I believe it's like the culmination of his time at Oklahoma City has like what he's doing now is the culmination of all of that in a similar way as I talked about the Black Caps test team. Like just everything they went through over the last 5 years has put them in a really strong position to embark on winning test cricket games overseas. For Steven Adams, he basically perfected the role of being a Kiwi big man in the NBA. He perfected that as soon as he went into Oklahoma City because he was doing it for Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, and then he had 6 or 7 years to really fine-tune it and just like amplify it, just make it better, enhance it. And then he's doing that at a very high level for the Pelicans, I believe. Like, if you ask me what I've seen Steven Adams. The only comparison you can make is to NFL, because you can't do it in rugby or rugby league. I've seen Steven Adams a meter or two in front of Zion, and Steven Adams has his elbow up into the chest of whoever's in front of him, and he's pushing him back, and Zion Williamson dunks over the back of Steven Adams. I've seen the recent one was Steven Adams. He like got a rebound, and there's 4, maybe they were playing the Hornets or something, and there were 4 Hornets like around him, and he's just like got the ball, and everyone's trying to get the ball off him, and he's just dominating, and then he's dominating the whole other team. That's what I've seen from Steven Adams, which is very New Zealand. And I think it's just like the Steven Adams has perfected what he does best. And now, as you said, he's in a system where it was very much appreciated in Oklahoma City. Like you look at how his mana with the community, with Oklahoma City. It was very, like, his work was respected and welcome in both teams. So that's pretty cool. But I think he's just like, he's hitting a peak of what he does best. I don't know, like, I don't check into these kind of stats too often, so I'm still trying to suss out like what they all mean and how they're relevant. Like, it's a bit different to just like taking a quick squiz all over Cricinfo, and you can instantly connect the dots and compare to what you're seeing yourself. But the on-court, off-court, like plus-minus stuff for Steven Adams is pretty crazy, reinforcing your point about what Stan Van Gundy said about like they're better with him on the court than without. It's plus 18.7, which is pretty damn good. And throughout his career, so starting in Oklahoma City, it's minus 4.9, minus 2.8. Then he gets a bit of plus action. He goes plus 8, plus 7.2, plus 7.6, plus 9.5, plus 3.2 last season. And then that balloons out to plus 18.7 points, I think it is, when he's on the court. Or something like that. 10 points scored per 100 possessions minus the points scored against them. So you might be able to explain that in the context of Steven Adams better, but what I'm seeing is like there's a massive disparity, positive disparity in Steven Adams' favor when he's on the court as opposed to when he's off it. So the culmination of everything he did before in fine-tuning being a Kiwi NBA player, it's like, it's hard. You have to kind of pause because the Pelicans aren't exactly winning heaps of games at the moment. So it's like, okay, we'll check on that later. But yes, the Pelicans are a lot better with Steven Adams doing his thing than they are when he's not doing his thing.
Yeah, I think what that stat means, without looking at it specifically, I couldn't say 100%, but I think what that means is that's how many points they outscore their opponents by in the time that he's on the court. So that's quite a lot for a team that's been losing a lot of games, right? And I mean, like the OKC numbers spread out over a whole season. Obviously, these things narrow down and whatever because you get your ebbs and your flows. I think the third season where he went from minuses to positives the rest of the way, I think that's probably, God, I can't even remember these things now, but I think that's probably when he moved into the starting lineup, which would not be a coincidence. And OKC always had really good starting lineups the whole time he was there. Like even last year when people thought they were going to tank and then they ended up making the playoffs on the back of a starting five that had like Adams along with Chris Paul and Danilo Gallinari, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and then probably by the playoffs it was Lou Dort. It wasn't at the start of the season, but yeah, like, so he's getting positive things even when he was playing for teams that weren't doing as well, or even when he was like, I don't know, it's just odd that there's such a disparity this year. But their bench has been quite crap. New Orleans, it's not been good. Even JJ Redick's been in a bit of a shooting slump. They've had injuries and stuff that have tested them as well. None of these things are helpful when it comes to trying to like build a new identity for a team as well. Like these are all part of the bumps and bruises you hope to get out of the way in preseason. You're having to do that on the fly during the season when you get these extra difficulties such as injuries and unavailabilities and whatever. So there's a lot of these things which you just can't really, you just can't make quick judgments on them because of this. But the Adams is such a consistent dude. He sort of like defies that a bit, and I think that's why Van Gundy's come to love him pretty immediately, because straight from the outset, he can trust him. Like he can trust that he'll go out there and he's not going to get carried away when he's in a situation the coach has said, do this, always make the pass from this position, and he'll be like, oh, but my guy's standing off me a little bit, I'm going to shoot. Like he's not going to be that kind of guy who like checks off and does his own thing, gets carried away or whatever. No, he's just going to like follow the instructions to the absolute letter. And that's got to be so handy for someone like SVG at the moment when that's not like, it's not that guys aren't following the instructions, it's that they don't even know the instructions yet because it's so early in the whole process. But yeah, that rebound one you're talking about before as well, when he's like grabbing the ball and is like the entire, I think that was the Kings game, which was pretty interesting because A, they won that game. It's like the only game for about a week that they've actually won. And B, they nearly blew it. So there was some close crunch time minutes. They were leading pretty much the whole way, but it got pretty close near the end. And one of the interesting factors in that is that Luke Walton's the coach of Sacramento at the moment, and he went with the old Hacker Steve thing, which like you don't. There was like a heyday of that when DeAndre Jordan and Andre Drummond and guys like this were playing big minutes all the time. The center position's kind of been limited a little bit in the last couple of years since. You don't see the old the Hacker Shack type strategies anymore, but we got at least one glimpse of this from I think they were 2 points up with about 2 minutes to go. They foul Steven Adams straight away, send him to the free throw line, and he makes both free throws because he had not been making his free throws all season up until that point. And somehow with the pressure on, he manages to just like nail him. And then later on, there was a situation, it might not be the same one you're thinking of, but it was definitely a similar situation where he like grabs an offensive rebound with the entire Sacramento team around him, surrounding him, and they foul him as he tries to go back up and throw it down. And he then nails both of those free throws as well, which is, yeah, like something about the pressure of it. I don't know. Maybe he's not thinking about it. It's just easier for him in a way where most people find it harder when there's pressure on. Maybe he finds it easier because he's not second guessing his like shooting motion or any of those things. I don't know, but or he's just got something else like that grounds him. It's easier to focus on his shooting. I think the most fluid and interesting and like impactful thing about Adams hasn't so much been him personally as it is that what you already alluded to, that combination with Zion Williamson, which is like, it's the obvious thing that the people like the smart NBA analyst types, the various American medias would like, well, they did say like this wasn't a trade when Adams went to New Orleans. It wasn't a trade that got such a glowing review. It's a little bit of a surprise because it felt that, I mean, I wrote a lot about this. We spoke about it on this podcast. Like, it felt like such a good fit for Steven Adams, but I think a lot of people looked at it and were like, well, but does he fit next to Zion Williamson is the problem. And the easy thing to say is, well, neither of them shoot 3-pointers, therefore no. In the modern NBA, it's a bad fit and you're going to limit this offense drastically. I'm not sure that's been I mean, you could still say that because their 3-point shooting hasn't been very good. And they haven't been scoring the points they should, and you could limit it to that. But I don't think that's where the problem has been. I think Adams and Williamson have coming up with a pretty interesting combination, really, because this is a team that is outstanding rebounding. Like they're one of the dominant rebounding teams in the league right now. And it's not all rebounds that Adams gets or Williamson get. A lot of their guards are getting these rebounds because these two big bodies, they block everyone else off. Adams especially is like a box out king, and he only gets about half the rebounds from his box outs anyway. So, he's like creating those opportunities and space for other guys to come and grab that ball. Skills that he learned playing with Russell Westbrook at OKC, no doubt. But Zion has also been scoring quite a lot of points, and he's such a fun player because he only shoots in and around the rim. Like, he doesn't really take jump shots at all, but he's so big and he moves so well. He's almost unstoppable when he gets in those positions. He's also a bad free throw shooter, by the way, which is a problem that they have. But like, you can say they don't take 3-pointers, they don't stretch the floor and whatever, but Zion is still getting to the rim and scoring points. Adams not as much. He has his big days every now and then, but that's not really his job with this team. Just as it wasn't really his job with OKC last year in a very different way. But like, Zion's scoring points, Zion's getting to the rim, Zion's throwing down these buckets, and he's shooting them like he's having days where he'll be like 13 of 16 for 26 points or something like that, plus whatever his free throws would have been, probably 0 of 4 or something like that. But like, I know the the analytic sort of ideas of these things. A 3-pointer is worth more than a 2-pointer if you're in a good 3-point shooter versus a step in for a long 2. Not much point in that. You might as well shoot from the 3-point range and risk a lower percentage of shots going in, but for more points in the long run. It's like 30% from, yeah, okay. I can't do the maths in my head, but say you shoot 3 out of 10, or 30% from 3-point range. That's 9 points. You shoot 4 out of 10 from mid range. You're shooting at a better percentage, but you're only getting 8 points. That kind of thinking. Like, Zion's scoring points in those situations, that's not really a factor anymore, but they're like, I've talked myself around in a circle, but I think I'm sure I put enough pieces in the jigsaw puzzle there for that to make some sense. Like, they're still scoring points, even if they're not shooting 3-pointers. The problem is the guys who do shoot 3-pointers aren't really making them. Eric Bledsoe is a bit of a streaky guy, and he's been a little bit in and out. I think he might have missed a game or two for injuries. Lonzo Ball missed some time with injuries. As I said, JJ Redick was slumping a bit. Brandon Ingram is the exception to every rule, because Brandon Ingram is just a knockdown scorer. He's been immense. He's the best player on this Pelicans team at the moment. Decent from what's his name as well off the bench, Josh Hart. He's been hitting a few, but no one else really is. There's Alexander Walker fella, Nickeil Alexander-Walker's actually had a couple good games as well. And he's the cousin of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, which I just found out on one of the broadcasts the other day, which is a little bit of one of them funky coincidences. But like, I see the guard play as being the big problem with the Pelicans at the moment, which is just funny because of how much of a focus it was on these two big non-shooting, the power forward and the center in this team. And I think I don't know. It feels like that's probably been one of the more success stories when you look at how well they rebound and Zion being able to score at will at the moment. It feels like the Williamson-Adams combination is doing really well. I just kind of feel, like the other stuff is where it's letting them down. They're just not scoring the points they should be is the problem. They just don't quite have the depth. It feels someone tweeted the other day like what they would do to get Joe Ingles on this team. And I had that idea stuck in my head of just what a perfect fit he would be. You'd have to shuffle. I guess Brandon Ingram might have to play shooting guard or something like that. I don't know. Or Ingles plays off the bench or whatever. But apart from the fact that Ingles and Adams seem to be fairly chummy anyway, couple, the Aussie and the Kiwi in the NBA getting on well. Someone like that would take this team to the next level. They don't quite have that at the moment. I don't know if that's something you can pick up in the mid-season, the buyouts or whatever. You might be able to find, or it might just be a matter of JJ Redick has to start hitting his shots. But it's a tricky one. I don't know if you disagree with this, but I don't really, as it stands, I just don't see them making the playoffs in the West. Do you? Do you think that's it's obviously the target. It's obviously and it's a reasonable target too, because they have the abilities. I just don't see them overcoming enough of these things early on in the season to be able to make it to that point.
I don't care. I just enjoy watching them. I'm not too fussed what they get up to. I'm just, as long as Steven Adams is...
That's the point though. It might, this first season, it actually might not matter if they make the playoffs. When you have young players under contract and you're obviously building towards something, it might not be the most important thing.
That's a great place we'll finish that. It might not be the most important thing right now. Another year, new coach, get those combinations sorted. So we'll check in definitely with Steven Adams again, but we need to move along because we have a bit of Australian NBL action. We've got a lot of Kiwis playing in the Australian NBL. The bit I want to touch on just here, because again, we'll touch on these throughout the tournaments, or get around to all the teams, we'll get around to all the players, give them a little bit of shine. We have Southeast Melbourne wildcard, a young bloke by the name of Yanni Wetzel. He played 35 minutes in their first game, and they also had Ruben Tarangi. He played 35 minutes as well. Ruben Tarangi is a bit more of an ANBL veteran. Southeast Melbourne also have Mike Karena and Isaiah Mariahohu Liafa. A couple young players. Mike Reina was brought in late as a fringe player, so we'll see how they go in the future. But most people will know of Ruben Tarangi. He's a veteran of New Zealand basketball business. What's some like key stuff again? We got to move through this quickly. What's some key stuff to know about Yanni Wetzel? Because he's come straight in and he's playing 35 minutes a game this season as a young lad, born in 1996, and he's out here. So what do you let's key details around Yanni Wetzel? Where's he from? And is he forecasting well throughout the season here in the Australian NBL?
Yeah, well, he started pretty fantastically. There was that half-court buzzer beater that he nailed at the end of the first half of their first game, which that's instant show reel stuff right there. He's a big fella who can shoot. Maybe slightly undersized as a big man, but not so much a problem in this league when you do have the ability to score. Haven't seen a lot of the jump shooting stuff from him so far for Southeast Melbourne, but he rebounds really well. He's got good feet, so he can play on defense nicely. He moves well, all those things. He's just an excellent little player, eh? He's one of the more fun Kiwis that we're going to have to watch and see what they do, because he does have that ability to stack up the stats. I think he's had a couple blocks in both his games. I'm pretty sure he's capable of dishing out assists now and then as well. He's just an excellent player. He did the whole college thing. I can't remember where he went, but he was, a beloved player in the same way that Jack Salt was a beloved player at Virginia when they went to won the NCAA title. The dude who doesn't cut corners, works hard, does his job kind of thing, very much of those Kiwi battler kind of ideals that we're talking about with Steven Adams, who takes those things to an extreme level. And would have been in a great position in his senior year at college for that team to have made a bit of a run, and he might have made some kind of a splash there. But as we all know, there was a pandemic and they didn't get to do the March Madness tournament or whatever, so he missed out on that one. He's come back. Bit of a miss, because I thought the Breakers were in the mix for him at first, and then he signed with Southeast Melbourne instead. Then he got released by Southeast Melbourne to go play in Germany. Then complications happened with the German league and the pandemic, so he came back to Southeast Melbourne. He started both their two games, and I think that's partly because Dane Pino has been injured, which is actually why Mike Cadena's come in. He's an injury replacement for Pino, so when he comes back, might see Yanni Wetzel drop to the bench, and that might cut his minutes. I don't know, but even still, that'll mean him on the bench against second unit guys coming in, being able to express himself in a different way where he might get more shots, that kind of aspect. It's not always the worst thing, but definitely there's a lot of exciting Kiwi talent around there in the league at the moment, but I think he's probably the one who you're going to see the one who you're most likely outside of the Breakers team to be okay, this dude's playing, I'm going to turn the TV on, watch for 20 minutes, see what he does, maybe stick around for the whole game. He's the guy who's going to be involved, playing big minutes most often and doing exciting, interesting things, and hopefully using this as a platform to launch himself into, best case scenario would be NBA, but otherwise big leagues in Europe. I don't know whether that's even with the rise of the NBL, whether that's even a thing anymore, whether the NBL itself is the means to an end. I don't know, but he's definitely an up and coming player with big potential who can. He's getting big raps, eh? So, and his debut in particular was fantastic. So he's the dude who, if he's on, you'd turn the telly on and sit there and watch for a bit.
Forget pro basketball, this New Zealand team's going to be damn good when they go to some major tournaments, assuming they qualify for those major tournaments, which they're going to be so good they probably will. So definitely check out Southeast Melbourne. 2 Kiwis playing pretty good minutes, couple Kiwis in deeper rotation as well. 4 Kiwis all up in their squad right now. Wildcard, to finish our basketball discussion, I'm going to give you a minute or two to tell the folks one thing about the New Zealand Breakers to look for in their first few games of the season, that's just like the most important thing for the viewer to understand, know, to look for with regards to New Zealand Breakers basketball in the current NBL season?
Yeah, there's quite a few things. Is the thing with the Breakers is you don't know which way it's going to go, because last year we had like both extremes. We had the best case scenario and the worst case scenario, and it averaged out with them somewhere in the middle, a couple games over 500, and missing out on the playoffs via like points differential or whatever the tiebreaker was, missing out by a tiebreaker. So coming into this season, you'd hope that most of the things that went wrong at the start of last season have been ironed out, and that's no longer a drama. It's not a new coach anymore. It's not. These are all things that cross over with the Pelicans as far as the on-court things. Like the injuries aren't there at the moment. Everyone's had ages to rest. Unfortunately, the Breakers also brought in a lot of off-court distractions and problems that probably impacted things as well. But even then, like there's not been a All Blacks overlapping with preseason. They're not deciding to delay their season so that they can jet off to America, play a couple friendly games against NBA teams who aren't really caring in their preseason. Like the preparation should be there, and this Breakers team should be excellent. They've definitely got a roster capable of challenging for it all. So it's just a matter of like how that actually plays out. And I think the most interesting thing is like when you look at there's probably a little bit of like the depth drops off at the end of the roster. We don't really know what Rasmus Back is going to be like. No one seems to really know anything about him. Even the Aussie scouting fellas don't seem to have a lot to say on the fella until we've actually like seen him go. Dan Trist as well was a bit of a weird signing when you still had at that point guys like Tom Vodanovich, Hiram Harris would have been available, who I would have thought would be better fits than either of them, but so it goes. Speaking of fit, though, I think the most interesting they fit the guys at the top of the roster, because at the end of the roster, I mean, there's only limited minutes to go around anyway. It's the top sort of 6, 7, 8 players that you've got to squeeze into a starting five. You've got to squeeze into your sort of 40-minute rotations, and I think that's where it gets really interesting because the thing to look out for, he's injured at the start of the season, but Corey Webster, it sounds like will play off the bench. He will be the sixth man for the Breakers, which seems like a demotion in a way, but also like when he was with Scotty Hobson last year, they didn't really mesh together fantastically. And to be able to instead, like it's not Scotty Hobson anymore, it's Lamar Patterson, but to be able to stagger the minutes in a way where you always have Lamar Patterson or Corey Webster on the court sounds pretty enticing, especially when like they're interchangeable as well. You can play Patterson with the second unit, you can play Webster with the first unit. I mean, we know he's got an incredible combination with his brother Ty, who'll be the starting point guard due to like All Blacks and just also the blood connection probably helps as well. Played plenty of basketball together, those two. The other one who's going to miss out on the starting lineup is Rob Lowe, who is the guy who a lot of NBA like writers actually really love him because he fills out the advanced stats really well. Like he's one of those guys who has good like teams seem to be better with him out there. But they've gone in a different way with the center position, getting Colton Iverson and an American import, who seems like a decent player. He seems like a role player type of center, but that's kind of all this team needs. So you get the best version of that you can find. Sweet as Rob Lowe's with the second unit and tries to nail some 3-pointers and grab a few offensive rebounds if he can, that kind of thing. Which means starting lineup is probably going to look like Ty Webster, Lamar Patterson, Tom Abercrombie, Finn Delaney, and Colton Iverson. That is a pretty handy unit. Interesting to see how the shots get spread around. Tom Abercrombie is a guy who should shoot more than he does, but tends to be the differential one. And Finn Delaney, of course, is every season we come in and Finn Delaney's being talked about as like this is going to be his big breakout year, and he's sort of had mini breakouts. Like he's definitely right on the cusp, but it should have been last year. Injuries held him back. This year, though, he absolutely is poised for a big season, at least as far as everyone who's in and around the camp seems to be saying. So plenty to watch out for sure from the Breakers. It's just which way is it going to go with them? You just gotta hope they stay out of their own way, because if the path is clear, this team could go a long way.
Rightio, and a similar question as we move into football wildcard, because the Wellington Phoenix have a draw and a loss from their first 2 games. They're not like Newcastle Jets lost all 4 of their games, or it's a bit all over the show because there's so many different number of games played, and the Wellington Phoenix there's a couple teams with 2 or fewer games. So the Wellington Phoenix are one of those teams. Again, just an early season check-in here, wildcard. Don't take me deep into the mangroves with the Wellington Phoenix. I'm just curious, is this a start to a disjointed season, in the sense that things haven't gone their way, but you're seeing signs of good football, good cohesion, chemistry, good stuff you're seeing that gives you hope later on? Or is this a concerning start?
No, I wouldn't say I'm concerned at all. It's like the first game they lost to Sydney FC. That's the 2-time defending champions. Both their goals were outstanding goals. Like, there's long range blinders. There's not much you can do about that kind of thing. And then the MacArthur game, obviously there was an extremely controversial red card that shouldn't really have been given. If anything, it was closer to a red card to the foul on Rufer rather than the foul by Rufer, but so it goes, and that kind of changed the game. There are concerns about the fact that they were very dominant up until that red card. Only leading 1-0 should have been more. If you score a couple more, you've got the buffer to be able to handle that red card better, but they didn't, and so they didn't. That's a concern, but it's a concern that was the same with them last year. Like last year, they also had really good periods of play, particularly in first halves, which they didn't fully score the goals to reflect that, and then got themselves in a lot of close games towards the end, which they were actually pretty good at holding on to. I'd be less confident of them doing that kind of thing now without Steven Taylor. Just with a weakened defence, I think there's less of a thing you can fall back and rely on. So they are going to need to be better at putting some of these shots away. Having said that, 2 games in, I think the quality of football has been excellent. They have been creating chances. They're in a position to where the finishing improves, and the team is going to be going on win streaks and everything, just like last season. I think as well, that's the other thing, is if the biggest problem that we have with this team is something that continues on from last season, that at least means we've got continuity from last season, which is nice, because that could easily not have been the case. It gets them up to a baseline which we weren't sure if they would be able to reach with a lot of the old, what do you call them? Like player crossovers, players coming in and out and whatever. So I would say concern levels with the Phoenix are maybe like a 1 or a 2 out of 10. I think it's extremely low at this point.
So you're going mild butter chicken there with the garlic. Nah.
Yeah.
In the W League, we have the key points again, just Kiwis doing their thing out there. We got 3 Kiwi women footballers playing for Perth Glory: Lily Anfield, Elizabeth Anton, and Malia Steinmetz. Then we also have a couple playing for the Melbourne Victory, Annalie Longo and Claudia Bunge, and this is what you wrote about during the week. Unfortunately, 3 Kiwis for the Perth Glory isn't helping them. They're last in the W League, last of 9 teams. They've lost both their games. Melbourne Victory, 4th. They've got a trifecta. They've got a loss, a win, and a draw. So we're going to follow all these teams and these players throughout the season, so we'll spread it around. But I'm just curious, wildcard, the names like Annalie Longo and Claudia Bunge. I'm kind of putting this into the context where I view the NRL as well. That just seems a bit more quality, whereas the Perth Glory, as far as their Kiwi input goes, they've got a bit more quantity. Like the Annalie Longo's a long-time international player, and Claudia Bunge looks pretty damn impressive herself. Do you have any insights on the Perth Glory? Is there a standout out of those 3 for the Perth Glory Kiwis? Lily Anfield is doing good things in goal. Is that where your highlight would be for the Perth Glory Kiwi woman?
Yeah, probably would be. Lily Oldfeld's won Save of the Week in both the two games that she's played, so she's clearly delivering on that front. And those have been like that. It's another similar to the A League where like the Phoenix have only played two games, other teams have played four. That's the same case in the W League where Perth have only played two games. They lost by a single goal to Adelaide in both of them. And one game it was an 80th minute penalty, lost 1-0. The other game it was like a 76th minute goal, lost 2-1. So like they're very close. They're not been dominated or anything. I actually think the three Kiwis have played really well for them, and like both of those games, Oldfeld obviously getting some of the highlight reel stuff, but like Liz Anton slipping in nicely, first professional experience really. Malia Metz, I think, is the same, though she does, unlike the other two, she does have international caps for the football ferns, but she's sort of been off the radar a little bit for a year and a half. Didn't make the World Cup squad, went and played in Australia at state level for a little bit. Now this is the step up from that is to play W League. She's been really tidy. She was excellent as well for Northern in the what do you call it, the Kiwi League. So I mean, I think all three of them are playing very well. But yeah, like you say, they're different stages of their career. Like these are three players on the come up versus Annalie Longo, who is like played 120 times for the national team or whatever and is generally just excellent. Someone like Olivia Chance as well is at this point coming into, not there yet, but coming towards like established veteran status for the Ferns too. And Claudia Bunch has only played a couple of times, but she was pretty excellent in the couple of games she's played, so she's a step up in that as well. It's that's probably the fascinating thing about this, like the stakes of Kiwis in the W League though this season, is that you do have players across that whole like career spectrum of like uncapped all the way up to like Centurion. It's quite I mean that's what you want to see. You want to see a good spread of players at different stages in their careers and all that, and that's what we got.
It's what we have across all of the Kiwi sports, is just everyone doing their thing. Newbies, veterans, it's all there. And one of the biggest veterans, Flying Kiwis, probably a Flying Kiwis Big Donnies, the biggest of them all, probably going to be overtaken. Like, let's be fair, there's some absolute guns that we're talking through here with regards to Flying Kiwis football, but old Winston Reid, he had a little excursion over to the US of A, and then now he's back at West Ham. Is this Winston Reid returning to play football for West Ham? Well, what's doing here? He was just over in the USA like a couple of weeks ago, right?
Yes, but on loan, and that's where I mean, when it comes to Winston Reid, like the contract situations are always just like off the charts, because I think he signed like a 6-year deal back in 2015 or something like that. Then a couple of years later, he signed another one, and he's barely played since 2017 when he signed that like 6-year contract. He obviously had his big injury thing. I think it might have been March 2018. I think was the last time he played for West Ham. Was out for basically 2 years. The Sporting Kansas City trip was his opportunity to get back to playing regular football, and he did, and he was very good for them. And that would have been very heartening to see, I would imagine, from West Ham's point of view, although at the same time you sort of get the feeling they feel like they've moved on from him, and his chances of coming back in would have been fairly slim if, like that, well, it's not so much about that. It's about like if they had the opportunity to sell him, they would have. But because they gave him such a big ass contract, no one else is going to pay that money for a guy who's been injured for 2 years. Sporting Kansas City had the opportunity. They had a buy now contract at the end of his loan. At least this is sort of what seems to be hinted at from what various people around the club have said, because no one speaks about these things very openly. It's weird because the contract stuff in other sports in America is so transparent. Everyone seems to know what every NBA player earns, and there are, very smart people who can figure out all the cap ramifications or whatever without being involved in teams whatsoever. Not the case in the MLS, which is really weird about how they do these kind of things. But yeah, like they could have bought him, but that would mean paying him something similar. It would mean paying a transfer fee, no doubt. somehow West Ham would want to get off, for West Ham to release him for free, Winston Reid would have to agree to that, and therefore they'd have to probably pay out a bunch of his contracts. So one way or another, some money has to change hands. Doesn't seem like that was a feasible option. So what you got is a guy who's still under contract for 2.5 more, or 1.5 more, 2.5 more years with West Ham. Well, you might he'll probably go back on loan to the MLS, I would suspect. But in the meantime, why not just go back and train with the club that you're contracted to, keep yourself fit? Major aspect in this is that, with the pandemic and all that, his family didn't go, his wife and kids didn't go to America with him. So obviously he was going to be coming back to London anyway to spend some time with them in his off season. So, you make the most of the situations, you see what happens. It's January, so they could register him if someone gets injured and they needed an emergency centre back. I wouldn't bet on it, but you never know. They might like what they see from him at training enough to be like, okay, well, we're not sending you out on loan again. We're going to we'll keep you around. There's definitely a chance of that. I wouldn't bet on it, but, certainly a possibility. It all comes down to the fact that he signed a huge contract, which West Ham would absolutely regret having ever given him, given how few games he's actually played for them since signing that. But, I mean, that's just good business. Whoever his agent is, I hope he got well paid for that because he's done his job.
Good business indeed. Very good business from standard agent business, though. Standard agent business. Right.
Agents are slimy creatures, but in this case, you could argue whoever Winston's agent is has actually kind of saved his career, really.
Oh, there you go. That's what you want. We'll finish with two players, men and women, who are kind of similar in what they're doing just with regards to Flying Kiwis business. When we're talking about young Kiwi footballers, Ryan Thomas has to be at the top of the list. This dude is playing in the big leagues in Netherlands. He's playing for one of the biggest Dutch clubs, and he's doing pretty well for himself. He's part of the culture. He's an impact on the field. He's doing a bit of everything. And you also have Rhea Percival for Tottenham Hotspur, who, unlike Ryan Thomas, Rhea Percival is more of a veteran of the football ferns, but she is just doing great things as well in the top leagues in England. So just give us an update on how Ryan Thomas has been tracking for PSV Eindhoven, and then how Rhea Percival has been going for Tottenham Hotspur, as far as their performances go and just their general situations as well.
Yeah, look, as far as general situation goes, what we're talking about here is the undercover king and queen of New Zealand football. And as far as the, club success and all that goes, there are players who have probably done more, but those are also played, everyone knows what happens when Chris Wood does something, or Abby Urseg or someone like that, Rebecca Stott, etc. Those are well publicized. Ryan Thomas, for whatever reason, seems to slide under the radar, and he's even sliding under the radar at club level at the moment because he had been injured for quite a while. He's only just making his injury comeback. Played a few times off the bench, one start as well since PSV came back into it after New Year's. So limited effect in terms of what he's done on the pitch, but just having him back on the pitch is the main factor. He's working his way back up to full fitness, having gotten injured during the Europa League, and they did make it through it didn't look like this would be the case when he got injured, but they did make it through to the knockouts of the Europa League, so that's another factor, as there are going to be a lot of games. Whether Ryan Thomas is it's just hard. I don't really know if he's being looked at as being in their top strength 11 at the moment, but even if he isn't, this is a big team playing a lot of competitions where you need depth, and he will definitely playing a lot of games. And just the fact he's doing this for a club like PSV, which is a big club, this is a club that is hoping to make the Champions League next year. That's a rarity. I just don't understand how people. I think it's just because the Dutch league isn't as accessible, although it actually is. They put out 12-minute highlight packages for every game on YouTube. It's really easy to follow what PSV do. It's just, I guess it's maybe a cultural thing. A lot of New Zealand football fans maybe aren't just tuned into that as much. I don't know, but what Ryan Thomas consistently achieves and just achieving by existing right now at a club like that, I just don't feel has ever gotten the credit it deserves. And maybe if he gets to like be playing Champions League games next year, that'll change. And I reckon there's this very similar thing to say about Rhea Percival as well, who's one of the few football ferns over the last 12 months who's actually been playing regular football. Like, it's not often that much of it, like with the American leagues not playing so much, and then a lot of other of the top players from the ferns, just like Ellie Riley's been bouncing around a couple clubs, not able to get like regular starting minutes at Chelsea or Bayern Munich, and starting goalkeeper Aaron Naylor at the moment is sitting on the bench for a Super League club in England. And Rhea Percival, however, is just playing, not just playing every week for Spurs, but being a real key player for Spurs, and an underrated one probably even for Spurs. Like, you watch Tottenham play and you don't necessarily see, like, you see the creative players. They had Alex Morgan there for a while as well. So there was a month there where the focus was entirely on Alex Morgan. Anything that happened was about how it can fit into the context of her. I guess that's what happens when you get like a global superstar playing for your team like that, a team outside like the dominant couple of teams in the country. And Rhea Percival slides under the radar like that, but then you check, like, for Flying Kiwis, I'm checking like Twitter searches and whatnot every week, and I'm seeing like chucking Rhea Percival's name, and every couple of weeks there's a new one of them like stat researchers or whatever, or the analytic, there's a I forget what the account is called, but there's a couple of them that'll tweet out just like graphs of stats and stuff, and Rhea Percival's always showing up on their like tackles and interceptions and things, like just all those little dirty work charts. It's really similar to like Steven Adams and his rebounds and his box outs and his screen assists and that kind of thing. Like, Rhea Percival does the same thing for Tottenham Hotspur, starts every single game. She's normally playing in midfield this season. Did play it right back against West Ham on the weekend, and that might be a case of like they've got a new manager in place now, so could be to do with that. Maybe just a slight change in like tactics or whatever. Don't know, but we'll see. Like, one way or another, she's playing completely regularly and just in probably the top league in the world at the moment, the English Women's Super League. And to be having that kind of impact, I think it's very hard to underestimate. But again, like, just because it's the Women's Super League, it doesn't have the sort of historical context, maybe in the wider football community, not just in New Zealand, but probably around the world, to be honest. There's a sort of problem that still exists, but that is another extremely underrated, high-performing example. And Flying Kiwis is stacked with them, but I reckon Ryan Thomas and Rhea Percival right now, they're your undercover king and queen.
Undercover king and queen. I like how we went full circle there. It's all about going full circle, and we've got Rhea Percival just playing football like a Steven Adams plays basketball. Like, Steven Adams is shining as a Kiwi basketballer, and then you've got footballers shining doing the what is like a dirty work stat in football? Is it like tackles won?
Yeah, I don't know, because possibly there's you can make an argument for a few of them. I think the problem with football stats is that you look at them and it's really, more than any other sport, influenced by like, any individual stat is influenced by the way the team plays. So like, so-and-so having the most shots, but how do they get in these positions? What are the defenders doing to allow them to, or there's various ramifications. So it's hard to, I don't know. It's kind of hard to say. It's an aspect of football that I'm trying to like open my eyes to more, is the just because the quality of like stat research these days is through the roof, and I'm just trying to focus more on that a bit these days. I'm hoping to write something on Chris Wood in the next 48 hours that has some kind of adjacent kind of ideas, but we'll see how that goes.
Because dirty work stats in basketball, you're talking about the rebounds, setting the picks, just those kind of things, and it's there's no cricket dirty work stat. It's just like a dirty work presence, and that's like Chiteshwar Pujara or Neil Wagner. Like, there's no.
Yes.
we're like trying to force a square peg into a round hole with these dirty work stats for starters, but then you have these dudes like Pujara and Neil Wagner. I actually, here's a concept to finish with wildcard. I think the avant-garde cricketer should be appreciated, and they should be celebrated, and they should be put up on a pedestal. And by avant-garde cricketer, I mean Cheteshwar Pujara, who, to the best of my knowledge, off the top of my head, is an Indian who doesn't play in the IPL. And I'll just confirm that because that's a pretty intense, bold statement, you know? Like, he's a test cricketer who doesn't give a fuck, and he only cares about test cricket. Rightly or wrongly, because, you know, like Neil Wagner, you do get pigeonholed. Yeah, Pujara, last T20 was some local game in 2019, so below IPL level. And you've got Neil Wagner, who only plays test cricket, but he plays both of them, and anyone else in this category, they play test cricket to such a high level that they don't need to do anything else. And in the world that we live in now, I think these dudes are like avant-garde cricketers, because they're the soulful musician, right? Like, they're the artist who is recording in analog as opposed to digital. These are those type of characters, but they exist in a sporting context in test cricket, which is pretty cool. So I just had to rattle that off. I'm not sure how you feel about that one.
Oh, I definitely like the concept. I'm just still thinking about like what dirty work stats might be in football. I think maybe like runs off the ball and things like that. I just don't know that those things are actually measured is half the problem. I'm sure somewhere someone has like come up with ways to like chuck a value on those kind of things, but you know, there's the kind of work that I guess doesn't get appreciated. I don't know, which yeah. I was going to make a parallel to Pujada there, but I don't think anything's underappreciated about him at the moment, not at this current point in time. Neil Wagner either. I think both of them are definitely getting in their avant-garde club, definitely getting the respect they deserve at this current point in time.
And that's like, if you're an avant-garde cricketer and you're in that club, it's instant respect. So there's no like levels to it. Like, if you're doing the avant-garde cricket thing, like, bro, how am I? So
BJ Watling as well, would you?
Yeah, he's up there. He's up there. So you go to, if everyone goes to Pujara's Cricket Info profile, it shows like your last 10 innings, and Pujara's starts with some tour games of India's tour to New Zealand last summer. So he got a 53 against New Zealand A, then he comes out, he got a 93 against the New Zealand 11, then it's the Test Series, couple of 11s, half century, and then it's first class, he gets a 66, then it's first class in Australia, and he gets a 54, then the Test Series against Australia. So his last 10 games of cricket have all been long format games and stretch across the space of a year. So, and he scored runs throughout them. So I don't know what the point of that is, but shout out to Cheteshwar Pujara. You're not the leader of the avant-garde cricket club, but you're secretary at arms, because old Wagnar's the leader and BJ's got to be high up there as well. So big it up to them, and we will be back early next week with another episode of the Niche Cage Variety Show. Then we'll slide back and repeat this, serve this up again with just the general Kiwi sports kōrero. So tell a friend, spread the word, subscribe, and all that other good shit. Otherwise, just be a good person and spread the good vibes. Cheer.